Start streaming. And work area. Is it working? No. There we go. Okay. Notes. We're out of the chapter of the book. We're going to do more detail on teleology and deontological ethics. So we're back into the ethics system. I'm going to start on some scenarios after we've done a little bit. We won't do too much work on virtue ethics and other such things. Feminist ethics. What was that? Although religious ethics will probably come up a fair bit, as of course anybody can use whatever type of ethics they want. It is very popular. But deontological and utilitarianism are probably the two most popular ones that we're using when we're using it for legal reasons, when we're trying to explain the decisions of our political leaders. Those are the two favorite, I guess you would say. So the principles of deontological ethics, there are 6 of them. In utilitarian ethics, there's only going to be 1, but it has a variety of different other definitions that are going to add to it. The most important one, the one that I mentioned when we first did deontological ethics, this is the first principle, the right to self-determination and autonomy. And while you're getting that now, I should quickly do attendance. Abby, Angel, B, Ella, Isabella, Eustace, Laura, Matson, Michelle, Orion, Boone, Ruby, Brian, Sloan, Stella, Teague. I could have just counted. Now this does come with imposed limits. The key is exercising this right with responsibility, because of course you have the right to self-determination. That gives you a corresponding duty. What is your corresponding duty if you have the right to self-determination? To respect other people's rights for self-determination, which means your freedom to swing your fists ends where another person's nose begins. You exercise this right while refraining from interfering with other people's right to determine their own selves as well. So that leads to a competing sort of rights and responsibilities. So for our examples, the most famous one, are they locked out of the classroom? Why don't I just open the door for them? And then they What other limitations do you have on your autonomy? How would come out of this? Punching is fairly extreme. Yeah.
I could try to take away someone's right to speech.
Free speech. Right to say. It goes duty to allow. Although it is important to note that refers to the government, both Canada and the U.S. My right to say things does not extend to Mr. Patel. As I said before, if I call Mr. Patel a poopy head, he could fire me. You have a recording now of me calling Mr. Patel a poopy head. So if you want to get me fired, there you go. As a private organization, you can make up your own rules. And if you want private organizations to be able to make up their own rules, then people are free to join and free to leave. Then they can curtail all sorts of things. Right now, you're all dressed up very specifically for a Thursday. Why are you dressed up so specifically for a Thursday? Yeah. It's Assembly Day. And just because it's Assembly Day, you wore certain clothes. That's really weird. One day out of the week, you change the clothes that were perfectly serviceable in other days. 2 days. Oh, right, Saturday as well. It used to be 3 days.
What was the Thursday?
Tuesday. For your advisors. Really?
Advisors are
Tuesdays used to be Advisors Day. We moved it. Everything went to hell in a handbasket, apparently. Tuesdays used to be Advisors Days, and so you wore your number ones on the same day as sports days, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And then at some point they decided maybe we should wear them less often so they don't wear them out as quick, because apparently things are expensive. And so they just wear them less now. Yeah. But even so, you've given up your right to change your clothes. And it's not really that you've given up. You've deliberately chosen to obey by this process. Tomorrow you could show up to class in a bikini thong. There's nothing really stopping you. You're allowed, according to the strictures, depending on the bikini thong. There might be, public decency guidelines. But assuming it covers more than the minimum amount, you could. You'd only be in trouble by the school, who says that doesn't correspond to our dress uniform. Or our regular uniform, given that tomorrow would be Friday. And if you did it continuously, maybe eventually they would send you home.
Wait, so you're telling me we would have to wear indecent clothes multiple times before we get expelled?
There's an opportunity. You have the opportunity to do multiple things. Expelling is a big step. I mean, maybe you just that morning received some terrible news, and that was your way of cope. We have no idea what's going on in your pretty little head. So cute. And so we're not going to expel you for doing something wrong once. Students make mistakes. You have probably seen students making mistakes. They get in trouble, and then they don't get expelled. Even for things, and not wearing the right uniform is less serious. Students aren't wearing the right uniform completely all the time. They wear white socks. See, that reminds me, we're supposed to check. And I always forget. Ron, are you allowed to wear gray socks?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't even know that.
I've been doing it all year. Nobody's been saying
Yeah, no, I think gray might be because they changed the dress code by carrying different socks in the school store, and they don't tell anybody. So one day someone showed up with red. I'm like, that's not allowed. They're like, I bought it at the school store, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on anymore. The world is turned upside down. So it looks like everybody has black socks. Well done, excellent. My father-in-law used to take black shoe polish and wipe it on his skin above his shoes, and then wear no socks. so that it looked like he wore socks. He went to a British boarding school in Britain, and that's what the cool kids did.
Not wore socks.
Yeah, you just don't wear socks at all. You just make it black with some black, shoe polish. What other restrictions do we have? You walk into a restaurant, there's a sign in front of every single one. Oh, there is that. They do ask that you wait there, so they have a lot of rules just to be seated. It's the same rules as a dining hall. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Which says nothing about pants, as many a student has pointed out. You could walk in apparently with no pants, and they will still serve you as long as you have shirt and shoes. Obviously not. So there can be limitations on your right. These limitations come about by protecting other people's right. That restaurant has the right to determine who is allowed on their property. They could not let you in for all sorts of arbitrary reasons. They could just say, we're not going to let people in who have blonde hair. Not allowed in. People who wear glasses. Actually, no, they'd have to let you in.
Why?
Protected classes. So our society has deemed that you can not let someone in for arbitrary reasons. So you could say not let them in because they belong to a certain political party. You could not let them in because they have birth dates in certain months. You could not let them in because they're not wearing a tie. You could not let them in for all sorts of reasons. But if you don't let them in because of a disability, or you don't let them in because of their gender, or you don't let them in because of their race, skin color, all those sorts of things, those our society has decided are important enough that people who have those has been discriminated against so badly that it is worse for our society to allow people those freedoms than to enforce that those freedoms are protected. So if you're of a certain protected class, and everybody is of that protected class. A restaurant can't say, oh, we won't let you in because of your skin color. Everybody has a skin color. Unless, of course, they removed all your skin. I guess you'd have a theoretical skin color. It'd be flesh. It'd be literal flesh colored. Yeah, which would be mostly red. So, irresponsible exercising of this right. Now, free speech is a good one. Canada has has laws against hate speech. They are much broader than those of the states. You can get away with a ton of speech in the states that you wouldn't get away with in Canada. You would find yourself before a human rights tribunal in Canada for some stuff that you could say perfectly legally in the States. We've decided that promoting genocide against other people is wrong, and if you say that in a public forum, we can actually bring you up on charges. They're not terribly, you get fined, maybe jail time, although that's rare. It's mostly used also to prevent entry of people who want to come to Canada to speak about those issues. So we have laws that restrict free speech in that way and allows the government to intervene that the United States does. But there is no complete freedom. There's no country in the world that has complete freedom of speech because, of course, we still have libel laws. So does anybody know what libel laws are? What's a libel law? You nodded. You didn't put up your hand, but you nodded.
Like name people or speak lies, essentially about.
Yeah, what kind of lies? There are some lies you're allowed to say. Their work, their ability to make money is financially protected. There's currently a $1 billion lawsuit against Fox News because they said the voting machines in a particular election were deliberately defrauding the American public. And there's a company that owns those voting machines and says it absolutely did not. You knew it did not, and you lied, and you cost us business. That goes to court, and it's currently in court right now. If you say that a particular author plagiarized their work and they didn't, they could sue you because people are less likely to buy their books. If you say that they are a poopy head, and have small genitalia, you are protected. In fact, that last one I didn't include randomly. That is often used when making fun of someone because it is protected in law that says when people say that, it is so unbelievable that they would know or say it that it makes the whole thing protected speech because they are obviously making fun of them. And insults are protected. So you copied all the work, you have small genitalia, and you're a poopy head is protected. But just you copied all the work is not. Be aware. It's something to be aware of. Notation of the limit. Now, ethical source, there has to be a limitation to rights. Every right has a duty. Maybe a different color there. All rights have duties. So it comes from that sort of logical extension. TB patients and confidentiality. Tuberculosis is highly contagious, and we've actually broken doctor-patient confidentiality for things like tuberculosis because we want to stamp it out. It's even now, it's really difficult to treat. This entire campus is built on a hospital that's sole job, the Alexandria Sanatorium, was to treat tuberculosis. As I said before, they thought ocean air was good for it. And so we really don't want people to infecting other people. We want them to take a course of treatment. So if you ignore a treatment and you ignore diagnosis, they'll actually publish and make other people know that you have it in order to find you and make sure you undergo the treatment. This was a big deal when HIV was the pandemic of the day, in that people debated if someone has HIV, should we be able to break confidentiality? That had a lot more worry to it because having HIV was also seen as being somewhat shameful. And so people who knew that they wouldn't have doctor-patient confidentiality might not come forward and get diagnosed. And there were certainly people that were arguing for it on both sides. Criminal Code, assault and related sections, shows this right. There's assault and battery. Now, assault and battery is an American term. Canada doesn't have that, but I find from movies and shows it's the most often the terms people are familiar with. So if I come up. What does that have to do? Now, assault doesn't mean I have to hit you. It just means I have to get uncomfortably close and within your personal space. If I'm in your personal space, that's assault. Battery is just touching you. This is, by definition, assault and battery. We actually have a card. Right? You could, actually. A police officer would show up. Because a police officer has shown up to Brentwood College School, for real, during threat. They were having a house meeting. This is the beginning of the year. On the day, I'm not going to say which house it was. It could be any of the 8 houses. And they were whatever. They didn't want to go to the house meeting. They're staying in their room. And so the duty master went in, chatted with them, like, you've got to come down to the house meeting. This is part of what we do as a house, and put their arm around them and said, come on, let's go. And they immediately phoned the police and said, someone touched me without my permission. Police officer arrived, interviewed the dirty person, interviewed the student, interviewed the house parent, interviewed witnesses, and told the student, yes, it's technically, the equivalent, Canadian equivalent. Please don't call us again. It's not that big of a deal. But also told the person, you can't touch students without their permission. If you go to a public school, teachers are routinely told, never, ever touch a student. Don't give them a hug. Don't give them a tap on the shoulder, because there could be all sorts of that. You live here in many cases. I'm sure you've been hugged by a house parent, a duty person, or anything at the time. Where lawyers come here to give advice, and we give them the heebie-jeebies, because legally there's no defense against it. Somebody needs a hug, you're supposed to no touch. Yeah. Sorry, what? It's a bit different if you're the guardian, yeah. Yeah.
So technically, parents are allowed to pay 30 children.
Yes. Yes, they are.
What?
If it's for educational purpose or something like this.
If it's educational purpose, didn't we went through this? Yeah. Yeah, and apparently I found out recently that it's actually 12 and under, so you probably don't qualify unless some of you are really advanced for your age. Great. Can't be advanced. Age works. Yeah. But there's actually a new NDP has just proposed a law to get rid of that entirely. And one side is freaking out because that means like if your child was going to run in front of the highway and you grabbed them and said no, you could be charged for physical violence against your child as a parent. And other people are saying that's not what we're right. I don't actually know if that is a valid interpretation of the law. A lot of times when laws get written, a lot of people freak out about the potential of it, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell whether or not that's reasonable. I have to wait to some YouTube lawyer to tell me if that's reasonable, and I just believe everything they say. Yeah, that's all I do. But for example, there was a bill that protected gender terms in the classroom. This is where Jordan B. Peterson made his name, because he said if I misaddress a student as she, her, when they're he, they, or something like that, I will get arrested and drawn to jail, and this is against academic freedom. And none of that happened. The law was put into place, and it was mostly it just added gender terms to the same area of the law where we say you can't use racial slurs against students. It also says you can't misgender them like on purpose to insult them. So if someone misgenders you, they don't go directly to jail. But if they do it repeatedly for a long period of time to specifically point out and annoy you, then they can, because they're harassing and bullying you. And added is if they did that based on race, if they did that based on other such reasons, cultural reasons, using culturally inappropriate terms, making fun of your religion, that sort of thing. That was just added to it. And for a while, there's a hullabaloo because professors were like, "What do you mean I can't misgender students? I've been doing it all along, and I enjoy it." Yeah, if you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, you're in luck. That's all I'll really say about that. He's a Canadian psychologist. He eventually became one of those men's gurus and type people. His book was relatively good. It told young boys that maybe they should clean their rooms, get out of their parents' apartments, and go get a job. And also, everything is the woman's fault. And it was the dichotomy of those that got him really famous. Yeah. He was Andrew Tate before Andrew Tate. He was a professor version of Andrew Tate, I would say. We also see autonomy in the general principle of what's called freedom rights. You have the freedom to do anything that's not explicitly not allowed, which makes it really difficult for us as a school, because we'll say, you can't do that, and the student will automatically say, because again, there's no rule against it. Well, now there is. And then we say, the rules are whatever I make up on the spot because I'm a house parent. And it's enshrined in case law, Millett versus Shulman, which we're going to discuss next. Now, there is a lot of notes in this case law. I want you to take relevant details, but not write it out word for word as the paragraph. This is Canadian Ontario Supreme Court, Court of Appeal. And it is the first instance in Canadian law that upheld this kind of things in a very serious context, because it came down to what is assault and what is saving someone's life. There, I'm going to stop there. In 1979, Georgette Millett, a Jehovah's Witness, was seriously injured in an automobile accident and was rushed to the hospital. Dr. Shulman, the defendant, determined that Millett's profuse bleeding mandated blood transfusion to preserve her life. It was nowhere questioned in court that the blood transfusions. This is not a case of, well, maybe he could have saved her life without blood transfusions. Absolutely not. If he did not give her blood transfusions, she would die. That is not a question in this particular case. He administered such treatment despite knowing from a card she carried that Millette had expressly requested that no blood transfusions be given her under any circumstances. Millette sued, alleging that the blood transfusion constituted negligence, assault and battery, and religious discrimination. So this is from a card that she carried in her wallet. It wasn't like nobody came rushing up and said this. He only knew from a card, but that card the court held was a legitimate way of telling. Now, initially, the reason this went up to a Supreme Court of Appeals in Ontario, so it never went to this. It didn't. Nobody challenged it after this. It didn't go to the Supreme Court of Canada. They held that card was valid. It held that the Jehovah's Witness card validly restricted Shulman's right to treat Millette. The Supreme Court of Ontario affirmed the trial court's judgment, concluding that Millette had informed the physician of her objection to blood transfusion the only way that she could. Absent some rationally founded doubt as to the card's validity, Millette's instructions stood. Now, key points here. The doctor can intervene if he didn't believe the card, but he could not intervene if he, say, didn't believe that their reasons were incorrect. Georgette Millette was a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witness beliefs are not on trial. You're allowed to have whatever religious beliefs you like, provided they correspond to some. You can't defend a religious belief to engage in illegal actions. But you can say that I'm going to restrict my own activities, and I can certainly restrict whether or not I get a blood transfusion. Now, this goes back to, do you have a right to life or a duty to life? Prior to this, many people would have argued that you have a duty to life. It is actually wrong of you to engage in any action, morally wrong, and legally wrong, in which that would lead to your own death. But if you have the right to refuse treatment, you cannot have the duty to life. It's a right that you can give up. This enshrined that into law in Canada. It was the first time it had done so.
So like, is like the main point of that, like if like you think you're saving someone, even if you're overruling like their like rights, it's still wrong in Deontology?
Yeah. And in Canadian law. Canadian law is a reflection of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I think as I mentioned when we first did deontology, is a deontological document. It says you have rights, and these rights cannot be overturned. And so you do not have a duty to life, which would be one of the reasons why suicide is no longer illegal. It's very difficult to make it illegal if it's something you're doing to yourself. You look, Fran, have we mentioned that suicide's not illegal before? Oh, that was illegal at a time. And people I recently had an argument with someone.
How would you prevent it? Yeah. Somebody commits suicide.
Oh, if you try to commit suicide, and I don't like the word failed in that context, because that implies that, it could be a success. And that's not what we want to say. If you fail to complete a suicide, they put you in jail, which must be great for your mental health. You're going to get so much better treatment that way. It's one of the reasons. They didn't. It's a health problem, not a criminal problem, but it used to be illegal. Also, your friends and family, if they were worried about you and you express signs of thinking about suicide, could then report you to the authorities and get you arrested. Just like if you're planning to rob a bank. If you're planning to do something illegal.
Who do they punish?
Oh, no, it's just a really shameful, illegal thing that you did. Just like a bank robber, dying in the course of committing a robbery. You're just a bad person. Yeah. This is not an unusual point of view. You have the maturity of being in grade 10 and observing this and going and learning a lot about mental health. I find it is, when I have these discussions with smaller children, they are very much, nobody is allowed to die ever. And I'll, because I teach science friends, be like, well, what about this case? We'll discuss, examine whether they're philosophical. And they're, the most common argument they get is like, no, you're absolutely not allowed. And you remember, little kids are like, you have to stay alive, don't touch the electrical socket. They get a lot of messages about not doing stuff. And if you're a little kid too, the idea that someone else might die is really frightening, because that includes your parents. And so that can really blow up their entire world if they make it that far. So this is I find a very really common point of view, and the older point of view really aligns closely with it. We've really adjusted our thinking and how people learn as they get older. By this time, I find students of your age are like, yeah, that's weird. I would suspect if you were younger, you may have thought differently if you thought about it as well. Although I don't know, people do change. So yeah, this is the first time in Canadian court this came through. It also upheld religious rights. You can have personal beliefs that are respected. Nobody's allowed to examine those beliefs and determine if they're rational or not rational first, because that's the whole idea of having protected religious beliefs. They're protected. You don't have to justify it. In determining what rights you may have, there is, of course, irresponsible reckoning of those rights. The number of interviews I saw after January 6th of people that are like, they shot tear gas at us. That's really unfair. What are you doing here? We're here to overthrow the government. And it's like, yeah, like you don't have a right to pick up weapons and go to your state capital and try to that's not an inherent right. You have the right to vote to do that. And that just seemed bizarre. Apparently, he's been reinstated, which I think makes this back to being relevant again. Although he's been reinstated and he refuses to use it. Trump, famously, was, of course, kicked off Twitter for hate speech. And then Barack Obama, it was said, came out with this one. And I do love having this Twitter account, being very smug about the fact that he still gets to use it. Apparently, this was faked, so he didn't actually say this. But your right to do things, of course, is limited on private organizations. Twitter can kick off whoever they want. And in fact, people can even buy Twitter and then really do whatever they want with it. Trump's been reinstated because Elon Musk thought it was unfair, and Elon Musk bought Twitter and now runs it as his own personal Twitter thing. But Trump has said, no, don't worry, I like Truth Social better, so I'm not going to come back to it. And I think he's contractually obligated, actually, with Truth Social. We have as well. Now you can make cases for. Let's see. It didn't load yesterday or last time I checked. Now you don't have the right to do certain things. They give a series of. Is it going to load properly? Also, I should probably take away the sound. And video. That one. Okay. Because there is the request for fair play if certain things are allowed or not allowed. Do you know what the Fairy Creek blockade is? Does anybody not know what the Fairy Creek blockade is? What's the Fairy Creek blockade? Yeah, yeah. So it's a section of old growth forest, I think.
Produced by activists involved in the Fairy Creek blockades and appears to show a confrontation Saturday between blockaders and Mounties trying to clear them from a logging room. After several minutes, the Mounties appear to use pepper spray on them. The blockaders react but don't back down. A second wave of pepper spray appears to be used. One Mountie, identified as a medic, also appears to be sprayed.
The RCMP appear to be totally out of control.
I love the fact that the medic was spraying them with pepper spray. Sorry, I'm not smiling because that's funny. I'm smiling just at the audacity. And another point of view, I think this is much the same. Getting arrested in the background. G20 protests from quite a long time ago. Variety of nations that make up the G20, economic producers in the world, came to Vancouver. There's naturally protests at the time, and people who protest various things that the government is doing. This is Canada.
She just had a gas mask on and they grabbed her. Just because she had the gas mask, they fucking grabbed her. Oh yeah. Did you see anything? I saw the whole thing. What happened? She had a gas mask on and she was walking through, and as soon as they saw the gas mask, they pulled her in, arrested her.
Sorry. Are you okay?
Sorry. It's okay. Accident. No problem.
Relatively, Fairy Creek protesters, not quite as violent. We're going up in escalation. We see the response by the police, masks, armor. And then you compare with something like the convoy against masks, who were able to occupy downtown Ontario for a very long time with very little police presence. If anybody hear the reels or TikTok things of people who were downtown during that time who lived in that area, they would honk their horns all night to ensure that their local residents couldn't get any sleep, and just stay there. And it took a really long time for the police to make a response to that. In one particular, do we have the sound for this? Yeah, the sound's on. Maybe they took the sound away. Horses are used to break areas into crowds. People naturally will back up from a horse. One of the reasons the Royal Canadian Mounted Police still have mounts is they're really effective at crowd control. People don't like being near large, sweaty animals. They tend to back up, and they're allowed able to give space. Some of the things we're looking, you have the right to protest. You sometimes have to get a permit first and agree to where you're going to be. But of course, there is a fundamental right to be able to protest whether or not it's recognized in law at places that make sense, such as your parliament buildings, your capital. What kind of protest can you make? Can you make a protest at the place that they're going to threaten to cut the trees down, where they're enacting the laws that you disagree with? And how much are you allowed to do? I remember being at the very first Iraq war protest in Vancouver, and police were there. They weren't doing anything. They were just making sure we were walking in the right directions. But then as soon as one person was off by themselves, they surrounded that person and they were about to arrest them and drag them away because there's no other people near them. Someone saw them, yelled, "Hey, everybody come over here." And the whole crowd turned, sort of engulfed them. And then the police sort of backed away. We're like, we're not doing that. Waiting to see who they could grab. The Fairy Creek protesters, I find, is a particular mirror in this, is that you have a crowd of thousands in terms of the convoy. Being there, no permits, no reason to really occupy that particular space other than to annoy the residents because they're not at the area where they're making noise. They just happen to be in Ottawa. And it took days and days and days to do anything. Fairy Creek, relatively small number of protesters. Police are there in their maximum gear right away, spraying them with pepper spray to get them out of the way. It is historically far more likely that a logging company will get action in BC. Before other types of protests, because it's one of our main economic industries, and part of the police jobs seems to be protecting economics over people. So there can be a question of fair play. That came up a lot. Can a business force you to wear a mask? The number, I think it's now a trope to watch reels and watch people go into a store, be asked to wear a mask, and then get really angry and start yelling at people. They can't force them. They can force you to wear pants. As far as I'm concerned, if someone can force you to put on pants and articles of clothing, they can probably force you to put on any articles of clothing that they want. They can enforce a dress code. They can enforce a top hat. If you're a private business, you can make your dress code anything you want. We're going to be a fine dining establishment, only top hats and ties. If you don't, only, I didn't think of it that way, but only they could. Charter rights do not apply in the private sector. It's the Human Rights Code against businesses that to prevent discrimination. And if they're asking you to wear a mask based on your skin color, that's discrimination. If they ask you to wear a mask based on your religion, that may be discrimination. If they ask you to wear a mask just because they ask everyone to wear a mask, they're being fair. They can also not require a mask. I've seen fewer, but I've seen equally videos of people upset the business, like make everybody in the store wear a mask. They don't have to. A private business can have whatever rules they like. The only time they'd have to make you wear a mask against their own rules is if there is a government mandate to do so because of a pandemic or something, which did happen for a little while. So they can't force you to wear shoes and a shirt for service. They can certainly force you to wear a mask. All right. Second deontological principle. The principle of equality and justice. Principle of equality, Justice is that everybody as a person has the same rights as any other person, all other things being equal. We do have to say all other things being equal, because if you have committed a crime and you are in jail, you obviously do have the same rights as someone who is not in jail. But that person was more irresponsible in terms of their exercising of the rights. If you are both exercising your rights responsibly, and everything else is fundamentally equal there, everybody has the same right. Now, some people may be better able to exercise their rights. If someone has more money, they may be able to buy a radio show. You can't buy a radio show. You don't have that amount of money. They can have more access to things than you do. But you certainly would have the right to if you could afford it. So it doesn't mean everybody's the same, but you do have the equal right if you can exercise that particular right. You also have the right to bring about the conditions that allow you to exercise that right. Ethical source, logical consistency. We can't have different rights for different people. Some people can't be more equal than others. That would be weird. We're going to discuss personhood a little later on. And that is a way of describing a being that is a center of rights and duties. Currently, only people have, well, not currently. For a very long time, only people could have those. Now hippos do.
What?
Yeah. I think it would seem to be mostly a legal trick. There was some actual attempts to give, for example, some other great, they're not purple, great apes rights, dolphins' rights, based on the fact that they are cognitively quite advanced, and perhaps we should also grant some version of personhood to them. They're Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos. Yeah. Oh, did I start everything back up again? Yeah, we've got sound, we've got picture. Pablo Escobar had a bunch of hippos imported into his country. And then when he fell from power, people wanted to protect them. Other people wanted to develop the area, or shoot them, or get rid of them. And in order to protect them, a U.S. court made them legally people. So killing them would be murder.
And Colombia is fine with this.
Legal analysts say the U.S. court has no direct effect in Colombia. It remains to be seen what influence the ruling might have on a lawsuit there, seeking to safeguard the hippo's well-being. So I think it's mostly political stuff. However, if you are the United States, if you say things like, we recognize this as a person, your laws may not apply to that country, but you are the United States, with the largest military in the world. It is larger than the next 7 countries combined, I think.
No, the GDP is the largest air force in the world.
Yeah.
The U.S. Navy is the second largest navy
Oh,
in the world.
I thought you were going to say it was the second largest Navy. I was going to be like, what's the largest? No, they have the largest and second largest air force in the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
But their GDP is like 7 times larger than all the other ones. But I think their army is actually outnumbered by the Russians.
Oh, yeah. No, I wasn't talking about sheer numbers. In terms of what the force projection, in terms of what they can do, and like number of ships, number of people. Yeah, there are definitely countries that claim a larger number of people in there. So personhood is the center of rights and duties. Whether or not those hippos actually have rights and duties, I don't know. But a U.S. court has said they do. Remember, the U.S. court is not ethics. That does not mean animals may not be a center of rights and duties. We do grant animals some rights. We have organizations that, and you will be charged if you deliberately cause cruelty to an animal. So if you torture an animal, you can definitely be brought up on charges. If you butcher it for food, that's fine, but you shouldn't be really mean while you're doing it. And we foresee that reflected in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Canadian Human Rights Act, and so on. Oh. The next area is kind of fun. And my Charter of Rights and Freedoms, obviously, that applies to all Canadian citizens. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, actually, I lied there. It does not apply to all Canadian citizens. It applies to anybody in Canada. And that is true of most countries. You stand on that country's soil, and you have the same rights and duties as any other citizen. Now, you're not a citizen, so certain other rights may not apply to you. You may not be able to vote, but basic charter rights do apply to you regardless of who you are. So if you're a refugee and you come, you have a right to a fair hearing. There's all sorts of rights that you get during that process. Same in the United States. There's often why countries will spend so much time ensuring that the lifeboat of refugees don't actually make it to shore. Because once they make it to shore, they have a lot more rights. They are protected by the rights of that land. So, and we very deliberately made it that way because that is fair. Some people shouldn't have more rights than other people. It actually doesn't matter what country they come from. But our response to that sometimes is to make sure they just never make it here. That boat quietly gets diverted to somewhere else. It's not our problem anymore. Principle of best action. I like this one. If you have a duty, you have a duty to do it in the best way possible. If a fire alarm goes off in Privet House, I have a duty to find out the source of the fire, determine if it's an actual threat, phone Price's Alarms. Actually, it's not TELUS Alarms, which is annoying because they're slower. Get everybody in the house, account for advice. Now, you can imagine, I could do that duty in a couple of ways. Fire alarm goes off, saunter downstairs. It's in dorm 21. Walk over to dorm 21, look around very briefly, wander outside. No, children outside, that's fine. I would clearly not be doing my duty. I need to respond quickly. I need to make a thorough search. I need to actually account for everybody. We need to take an attendance. We delegate that to the house captain and then double check. If you have a duty from something small, such as cleaning your room, doing it to the best of your ability. Not just taking all of your stuff and hiding it in your drawer and then closing the drawer and then hoping nobody would look. House job? If you have a duty to do a house job, you have a duty to do it to the best of your ability. You have to vacuum this hallway, not just walk through and pick up any pieces you see with your fingers and then fail to vacuum it entirely, hoping that nobody will notice that you actually didn't vacuum it. We see this in a variety of areas. You must do your duty. And law, it comes out to professional standards. If I'm a teacher, I have a professional standard to maintain. I'm not allowed to walk in here, look around and go, oh God, you again? And then start shaving because I didn't shave, back in the house or something like that. There's a teacher, I come up with that example. because there's a teacher in the Vancouver School District who actually eventually got fired for that. And then the principal gave seminars on how to fire a teacher, because within the union, it can be a little difficult to fire a teacher if you need to. He didn't get fired for how bad his lesson plans were, and apparently they were very bad. He got fired because he would perform his morning rituals in class. Shaving, washing, plucking his nose hairs. And that was conduct unbecoming a teacher. Yes. That is very strange. That is actually one of the few ways you can get fired, quicker than other ways. With ones like it's a bad lesson plan, there's actually a procedure they have to follow in which they give you a chance to improve. You get professional help, as in people teach you again how to come up with a lesson plan, and it can be done. But if you're just doing things that are weird and gross in front of students, you can get fired a lot more quickly. Was she good in her lesson plans, at least?
She wasn't the worst math teacher.
Oh.
She would also sleep on the floor of the classroom. She'd just be like, oh yeah, today's not my day, here's a worksheet, and then pull out like a pillow or blanket from this closet, and then set it up in like the middle of the classroom
And just sleep.
Yeah. And she'd like still be sleeping on the floor or whatever. It was really strict. That was
And people, mental health and COVID. Okay, I'm willing to give it a.
no, but it was like in seventh grade when.
So pre-COVID, she was getting ready for it. Yeah. I can respect sleeping.
Pour your water bottle on her when you left class.
That's just mean, though. If you are a teacher in the province of British Columbia, you are subject to regulation by an independent teaching board. You can go in and look up all the disciplinary statistics. And you can also search the discipline database and find out what bad things have teachers been doing. Anyone can do this. If you would like the link, I can provide it. So I didn't go in here to find out. So up to December 26th, what did Cindy do? Cindy Tong. Come on, Cindy. Cindy Tong holds a valid professional certificate. At all material times, she was an elementary school teacher. Following happened while teaching a grade 2 class. Showed her class a number of movies that were rated PG-13. The House of the Clock in Its Walls, Iron Man 3, The Avengers, and Doctor Strange. Also showed the first film in the Halloween franchise, which is R-rated, which means restricted to viewers 18 years and over. Some students reported feeling frightened after this film. What grade was it again? 2! She's teaching an advanced film class. Showed her students movies for 2 days in a row so she could complete her report cards. At one point, the learning support teacher told her that she should only show G-rated films, and then she showed them The Avengers, PG-13. Students perceived she had favorites who were given more enjoyable things. Students reported feeling sad that she did not appear to like them all equally. Played a virtual game called Mafia. Hey, I've played that with students. I didn't know that was bad. How many of you played Mafia? Yeah, I think it's just a children's game. Yeah. Tong told students she had bad dreams at night, which sometimes came true, and she wore a necklace to stop the dreams from occurring. So these are all the she assigned homework on Google Classroom. She would give some students hard homework and other students easy homework, and identified which students were which. Distributed nature notebooks, which had verses from the Bible. If you were a public school teacher, if you're a student in a public school, of course you can bring your own Bible to class, and you could do anything you'd like in terms of reasonable religious accommodation. If you're a teacher, you cannot enforce your religion on others. However, I could if I got Mr. Patel's permission, because we're a private school. most private schools are actually religious schools. We're actually weird in that we're not. Okay, what happened to her consequences? Her consequences are she admits that it's true. She admits that it's a professional misconduct. 1 day suspension that she served on December 7th. And she has to complete a course on creating inclusive learning environments. And then how they came up with the agreement and the effect of that agreement and what will happen if she doesn't do those things like take the course. So all of that is things she did. She has to take some Pro D and she gets suspended for 1 day. For 1 day. Which she showed some movies in class. Depending on how frightened the children were. Russell. I have a good feeling about Russell. Secondary school teacher.
High school.
High school. We're in a secondary school.
Oh.
Yeah. Middle school is middle school, elementary, middle, secondary. And that's why the term post-secondary school is university, because it's after secondary. Whoa. He was coaching an athletic practice when, without warning and without student A's consent, Bogart used student A to demonstrate a technique. The technique demonstrated required him to physically interact with student A. Student A felt very uncomfortable as a result. So, I did go up before and poke O'Brien. Entered a consent resolution agreement with the commissioner, admitted that his conduct was unbecoming, and got a 1 day suspension. It doesn't say. Just without warning. He's a coach, and he did something without warning. I felt uncomfortable. So he could have just grabbed him and demonstrated a rugby move. Oh. Doesn't say. Anybody on there that you would like to know? George Constant. Oh. One second. Given that just has numbers in it, I'm going to briefly read it first before I show it to you. That being said, you can look this up yourself. Okay, yeah, it's bad, but not bad enough that I would this is why this process exists.
You showed this to us, so you appear on this list.
What?
Because you showed somebody this to us, you appear.
Yeah, that would be quite that. You were able to look all of this up. It's public knowledge. And they get rid of the names in some cases on purpose. That's usually to protect the child. The teacher, by contacting and communicating with students on social media and making inappropriate comments to them in these exchanges, and then told the students to keep it a secret. If you ever have small children, then one of the most important things you can teach them, there is no secrets, even between family, because the most common way that they can become abused is when a family member tells them to keep this a secret because we want to keep it as a surprise or something, which I did. And then when I wanted to keep the Valentine's gift that I had gotten a secret, they immediately told Ms. Henley because, of course, I had previously told them that we don't keep secrets. So it does have consequences. Teacher met individual students on multiple occasions alone in his office with the door shut. In most of these one-on-one meetings, the student was upset, and the teacher talked with these students about the students' personal matters, including their family or their relationships. On a few occasions, the teacher placed his hand on the student's hand, knee, or thigh. The teacher was aware from these discussions that some of the students had significant personal issues, but he did not direct them to a school counselor, nor advise a student counselor or administration about his discussion with any of these students. He was suspended for 15 days and also required him to complete remedial learning to improve his understanding and practice regarding professional boundaries. So that would be a little bit more of a serious one. But still, only 15 days, a couple of weeks. Any other ones? Hearing decision. On the decision, found the respondent guilty of professional misconduct. Once the panel makes a finding, the panel is empowered to make an order imposing the consequences. Filed submissions. The respondent did not participate in the findings hearing. It was sent to her according to the rules. It appears she taught at Lakeside, an independent school in Kelowna. And she said she had a professional certificate, and she did not. She held one from Australia. And that is not necessarily good enough for Canada. You have to also get one in Canada and apply. And so she misrepresented her credentials. So I don't know what, there's a lot here too. Use of a fraudulent certificate to illegitimately occupy a position of trust and influence over students. That just means she became a teacher. Whoa. I don't know what a hearing decision is, but I'm guessing based on that, it's when the other person doesn't show up. And so it's a decision as opposed to a consent resolution agreement, which would be both parties agreeing to this process. So you have been told you've done this and you participate in the process, you get a consent resolution agreement. You fail to show up and you don't participate at all, they still go through the decision-making process. It just becomes a hearing decision. I do know of one particular case that went to court. You can find of a teacher that went to Brentwood College School, and that went through this process. And what happened is that person happened to be a house parent, and their student didn't get permission to go on weekend leave. They went on weekend leave anyway to a house party being hosted by a couple of students that weren't Brentwood students, and their parents weren't around. The house parent went to the house where that student was, because they went without leave. They figured out where they were going because they knew who their friends were, and went to the house, banged on the door and said, I want to see so-and-so. So-and-so didn't come to the door. Eventually the people who the teenagers in the house answered, and they said, I want to see so-and-so. Convinced them to hand over the student. The student eventually came back, grabbed the student's jacket that he saw on the floor on the way out, and then took him back to Brentwood. He was charged with trespassing and brought forth because he grabbed the jacket on the way out, and they said that was actually our jacket, so you also stole from us. And the teacher board did find that house parent was guilty. I learned about this case at Brentwood because they get a lawyer every few years to come in and just talk to us to go over things like this and make sure that we know what certain boundaries are. Because again, we are weird. I have students with the door closed in my office all the time. As a house parent, sometimes they're crying. There are personal matters that we discuss. We ask them, we make sure other people know, like the house parent, of course, when we're needed. We shouldn't be making inappropriate comments. And so there's a lot that we want to be aware of when we're doing that, because we're a bit weirder than the regular school. We asked the lawyer, like, okay, the student wasn't on leave. If the parents found out that he had gone, drinking, got in an accident, hurt himself, absolutely would have been trouble for the parents if they had done nothing and they knew where they was. What should he have done? The lawyer was like, you're going to be charged either way. So which one do you want to be charged for? Do you want to be charged for going to get the student and bringing them back? Or do you want to be charged for ignoring them and then they get hurt? You're like, oh, you're probably going to get them. He's like, yeah. It didn't hurt Brentwood's reputation at all. Everybody who reads that goes, yeah, I know exactly why I did that. And that's true whether you're a nurse or a doctor or any other way. Sometimes you're going to be faced with a choice in which either choice is probably going to make someone mad enough to charge you. Just make the one you can live with. So professional standards are the reasonable standards. Are you doing your best action? I don't know what's going on in that poor math teacher's life, but I would submit that lying on the floor with a pillow and pulling a blanket over yourself and saying, today's not my day. I mean, I get it as a teacher, but maybe not teaching. About time to move professions, perhaps. That's the website. If you want to search for it, if you Google like teacher commissioner regulation outcomes, those types of words, BC, you'll probably pop it up. Okay, principle of impossibility. I also really like this one because this gets me out of duties. A right that cannot be fulfilled under the circumstances are ineffective as rights. A duty that cannot be met ceases to be a duty. So that means if you have a duty, if it's impossible for you to do it, it's not a duty. If you are required to do a house job, but your house parent has confiscated all the vacuums, you do not have a duty to do that house job anymore. Pretty much impossible. You have to be allowed the circumstances in order to do your duty, and so if you can't do it, you can't. Now, this comes up in healthcare all the time, in that sometimes a patient becomes moribund. They have entered a stage in which preventing death is impossible. They do not have the moral obligation to continue life support, to continue chest compressions, to continue any actions. That won't really make any kind of a difference. If a doctor does their best, you can't sue them even if the patient died during the operation. Mistakes happen. Sometimes operations aren't successful. They did their best, they tried, but if it was impossible to do, they don't have a duty to do the impossible. It seems somewhat obvious, but it is useful to have as a defense in court to say, look, it was literally impossible. Here's what happened while we were doing the operation. Blood pressure spiked, this happened, that happened. We did our best, but nothing could have prevented that. Ethical sources logic, we can't do the impossible. And pretty much all law accepts the possibility, assuming you had no duty to correct it prior. Your job is to make sure that the electrical plant doesn't explode. You failed to do safety maintenance for 10 years. Then an accident happens. And you go, well, at the time of the accident, nothing would have stopped it. And they're like, yeah, but you didn't do safety inspections for 10 years. If you had done those, then it wouldn't have exploded. Maybe. Very likely. This actually happened. In a hydroelectric dam, there was a gentleman whose job it was to go in and take X-ray photos of all of the metal bolts that go through the dam, and the rods that are inside the dam itself. And that way you can look for corrosion, and it will show you if there's cracking and what's going on with the dam. and they found out that he wasn't. The dam eventually broke partially. It caused flooding in a town that was below the dam, a lot of damage, and he couldn't have prevented the dam from crashing. It was impossible. But what they found out he was doing is he just stopped going, because you had to go in the dam, like right inside of it. It's like dark and kind of icky. And so rather than taking new X-rays, he just reprinted the X-rays from the year before. This is why plagiarism is wrong.
But if he fucked them,
You can plagiarize yourself. Yeah. If you write an essay for one teacher and then you take that essay and you give it to another teacher, that's considered plagiarism. You wrote it, but you didn't write it for that purpose, so you copied from yourself. Yeah. This is an area that comes up when we're asking a doctor to literally do the impossible. Do you have the duty to do, for example, experimental procedures? You've heard that there's this procedure out in South America that doctors have just started using. Can't we use that, doctor? Would a doctor have an obligation to try these experimental procedures as part of the process before they gave up on the impossible? Yep.
you know, subject person is going to die, and you have the chance with this new procedure, which is try. Yeah, but if you can save the person another way, you probably should choose the way you already know.
You should probably choose the way, but let's say all the regular procedures have failed, and it's not just a matter of could you, but if the doctor doesn't, can they be found at fault? They don't want to use an experimental procedure. You have read this on the internet. They're using this drug. Doctor can get access to this drug in a brand new way that nobody's ever used before. Please use it on me in this way. Oh, the person is the one asking for it. It's the doctor that doesn't want to do it.
If the person signs something, then it's official, then when the person dies and they're like, you took this person, then you signed this.
I'm going to re-ask you that one after it. I want you to think about this one while you're gone. I do want to say, how the heck do you sit in these things? Yeah. No, I'm talking about the kilt. My leg has fallen asleep every single time because I can't sit properly. It's like, yeah. I ordered it years ago. I had a really cheap one, and I found it quite nice to wear. Also, as part of my role in Omni, it's a very gendered divide that the boys never wear kilts. And the girls were for a long time made to wear kilts. So I just thought, I'll get a kilt. And then, of course, COVID happened and they weren't making kilts for a very long time. And it just recently got done. Yeah. Because we are based on old school British boarding schools. So the English culturally appropriated the kilts for the girls in their boarding schools. We carry on that tradition. Yes. Yes, because girls have to wear skirts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.